right. Thank you for joining me once again. My name is Keisha J. Kelley. I am the host, the CEO, and the founder of Black College Experience. First of all, I want to thank everybody for the well wishes, the congratulations, your prayers, your donations, and all of the support for 5 years. As Black College Experience did just celebrate 5 years on Saturday. So thank you for that. Sending all your well wishes and joining me and celebrating with me over the weekend. It was a long weekend, but we are back at it. We have a special guest today. I'm super excited to have the one and only. Now, when I reached out to him, I knew. I was like, it's going to be a chance he might say yes. It might be a chance that he says no, because I know that he's a busy man and I know the season that we're in. So I'm not going to delay it because I know his schedule is busy. I'm going to go ahead and bring on the one and only Steve Wyche of the NFL Network. Hey, Steve.
Hey, Keisha, thanks for having me. And look, there was no way I was going to say no. Come on. You have been so nice and so good to me, and for everything you're doing. I want to congratulate you and celebrate you. And of course I would come on. I'm glad that you asked.
Thank you. Y'all check out that Howard Bison shirt. Y'all see the Bison shirt. So you got a Bison and a Jaguar.
There we go.
You got a Bison and a Jaguar on at the same time. And it's surprising to me, Steve. It's a lot of people that were like, oh, for real? He went to Howard? I was like, y'all know that anytime I interview somebody, it has to be some kind of connection with HBCUs. It's not just a random, I'm interviewing somebody. It has to have some kind of connection.
Well, I mean, then they don't follow me because I only mention it like every other post that I went to.
I was like, have y'all not saw him? It's like always a t-shirt, a sweatshirt, a hat, something in there. I was like, he's always talking about something Howard in there. I was like, if you follow him, you'll know that's what he's talking about. So we're just going to hop right into this. First, I'm going to start off by saying thank you once again for joining me. I truly do appreciate it for joining Black College Experience. Let's go here. Now, you played sports in high school, correct?
I did.
So
you go ahead.
Okay, so you played sports in high school. Go ahead. Talk about those sports you played in high school.
No, I mean, look, it early in like 10th and 11th grade, well, I always played baseball, basketball, and football.
Okay.
And then when I got to 11th grade, it became football and baseball. And then my senior year, it was just football. And I was getting recruited. I actually attended the University of Missouri for a couple of years to play football. I grew up outside of St. Louis after moving there when I was in the third grade from Minneapolis. So I was at Missouri for a couple of years, and then I went to Howard and was going to play football there. I mean, that was the main impetus. Willie Jeffries had recruited me when he was at Wichita State. Remember, he was the first black head coach at that level at Wichita State. And him and I had connected. But by the time I got to Howard, I was kind of like, let me just get my grade. I was like, let me get my grades together. I'm not going to go to the NFL. Let me focus on this. If I get the itch, I'll go ahead and walk on. But once I stopped playing, as we say in football vernacular, I lost my stinger, and I was good to go, man. Everything went the way it was supposed to. So you lost it. You was like, it's over with. Don't want to play anymore. Had no desire. No, nothing. Yeah, and it was weird. I was one of those guys. I was a quarterback my whole life until after my third game, my junior year. The team ahead of me, when they were juniors, took our high school. It was a new high school. But that class got undefeated as freshmen, JV, and then went to like the state quarterfinals. Well, they introduced me. I was the only junior to start as a senior at quarterback. And they changed up the offense for me because – wow. We used to run that old option and stuff like that, but I was one of them pretty dudes that could throw it all, throw the ball all over the place, and this and that. And we went 0-3 to start the season. They were like, "He's got to go." So they moved me to defensive end, and that was my natural position. And so it was just a stroke of luck that happened. So I had to, always had to lift to keep weight on. I mean, even when I got to college, I probably went there at about 205. So it was way too small my redshirt year. By the end of the year, I got up to about 225. But I mean, I'm constantly just lifting, no chemicals, but constantly just lifting and doing everything to keep the weight on. And so when I transferred and I'm not lifting all the time, the weight started coming off. And I was like, this is how it's supposed to be. So let's let natural order just take its place. So, and what was college like for you at Howard? What was it like at Howard University? How did you even choose Howard University? Let's see. I didn't know it's a story behind it. So let's go to the back end. Let's go to the back end first. And that's a great question. So where I grew up in St. Louis, there were very few Black families, very few. And so I had come back for like a Thanksgiving break, and a buddy of mine, another Black dude, I said, man, I'm going to transfer. I don't like the school. They changed, the football coaches that brought me in got fired. The new guys, they got nothing for me because I'm not one of their guys. And I was looking at a bunch of schools in California, and he was like, man, let's go to a Black school. And I was like, you know what? I didn't think about that, but my mother and father both went to Hampton. So I applied to Howard and Hampton. And Willie Jeffries got back to me. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to go to Howard. I know some people who went there. They love it. That's all they do is rave about it. But I was one of these nervous, and there's a lot of students like me, and I didn't know this until I got to Howard. I'm nervous. Like, okay, I grew up around almost all white people my whole life. Am I going to be accepted when I get to Howard? And so I get there, and, Howard at the time, DC was the murder capital of the United States at the time. It was then in a tough area. It's not a tough area anymore. But within 3 days, I was like, I'm home. There was a lot of students, who came from situations like me, a lot of students who didn't, but it was very, very welcoming. And at the time I was still like 230. I was jacked and had 18.5-inch neck. And I was like, you're on the football team? I was like, nope, not anymore. But it was just from the second I set foot on campus and the way everybody responded. And, they have a big event at the beginning of the year on the yard, just kind of an opening. I wouldn't say a picnic, but just kind of like a festival, so to speak. And all the Black students from Georgetown and Maryland and American University and GW came over. So it was like a really welcoming thing where I was like, okay, it's going to happen here. Now it's time for me to put in the work that I have to put in.
And that's how, that is. And I think that's the important thing. When most people come onto our campuses, once we get on that first tour, that first arrival, once we get to campus, that seals the deal. We know pretty much that pretty much seals the deal, because everybody from HBCU say the same thing. It was a welcoming environment. It was a family oriented environment. And I think that's what seals the deal with most of us when we choose our school. I remember still going to Southern University. I still remember going to register as a freshman. I still remember what I wore. I remember it being my dad and a deacon from church. I rember everything from head to toe. It was just the three of us. It was like a 9-hour drive from Huntsville, Alabama, but I still remember going over to register for school and everything I did. So
now the registration process, that's an interesting point, because you'll never forget.
Never.
Because someone told me before I went, have everything in triplicate because they're going to lose all of your initial paperwork.
Did they lose it?
Yeah, because, when I went there was no online registration. I went there from 86 to 89. So they lost all the stuff. Even though I had registered for my classes, I had classes in the system, but they lost all my paperwork. They lost all the medical stuff. They lost all of the other applications. I was like, here. So I was like, great. That part was taken care of. With so many students waiting for that financial aid and everything, it was like, no, this is the worst experience of my life. Until they actually, get ahead the social events and everything on campus. And they're like, okay.
And then you forget everything that happened. And I remember that when I was going in, I went in 99. And then there was some people that went in 98 from my high school in 97. So 97 was a guy named Franco Blackburn, and he was playing baseball. And I remember we had drove over 9 hours to go register. And it was early registration for incoming freshmen. And so I remember going in, and when it got to like around, my last name's Kelley, they got to around K or somewhere like H, and they were like, okay, we're done for the day. Y'all got to come back tomorrow. And I went outside, and I didn't know anybody. I told my dad, I was like, they said they're done for the day. He was like, you better march back in there. Tell them people that you drove 9 hours and we're not coming back tomorrow. So I did. I walked back in there, head hanging low, and I ended up running into a coach. And this coach just so happened to be a baseball coach. And he asked me why the long face, asked me where I was from, told him where I was from. And then he asked me if I know the guy named Franco. And I was like, oh, yeah, we went to school together. Like, he came here 2 years ago. He walked up to the front, got me registered. And that's how I got registered at Southern University. Because otherwise, I wasn't getting in school that day. It was one of the craziest things. But of course, like I said, these are the stories that we live for. These are the things that we tell our kids about, and things that we will recycle over the years. So now let's go here. In your honest opinion, because we know right now so many things are going on with HBCUs at our institutions and athletics. So many people are committing to our schools, especially in athletics. We can look at Master P's son. We can look at what Chris Paul is doing. We see so many things that's going on. How important do you feel like it is for us to continue to tell the story of our historically Black colleges and universities?
Well, I mean, look, the great thing is we're seeing this a renaissance of HBCUs in terms of applications. These, a lot of these schools now they're raising admission standards because they're getting so many applicants. And I love, looking at all these HBCU websites when students are posting, "Hey, I just got accepted to Grambling, I just got accepted to Southern, Alabama A&M, Howard, Hampton, Cheney." They're proud. They're proud of their U's, and it doesn't hurt. And again, Howard's going to be my basis, for example, but that the Vice President of the United States went to an HBCU.
Right.
And people, look, we all understand that HBCUs were created because Black folks could not go to school with white folks back in the day. But it is a choice now. And there are students, who are getting accepted by 7 or 8 schools who are choosing to go to HBCUs. Some because they came from environments like I came from, and they want to see what it's like to go to an HBCU or be around a lot of their peers who look like them, who may think like them, whatever. Other students, this has always been their goal. Some are legacy, all of those types of things. But just to have so many prime examples now in the media, on television, visible examples, politicians, you have Keisha Lance Bottoms, the mayor of Atlanta. I think she's a Spelman graduate. Just to have those types of examples out there really help. And now we're seeing in athletics, a core maker going to Howard, one of the top basketball recruits in the country. You mentioned Master P's son. You mentioned Chris Paul, a lot of the work he's doing, enhancing current athletes to finish their degrees or get master's degrees from some of these programs that Black colleges are offering now. So athletics is really stepping up. I mean, I love seeing these NBA players, NFL players wearing HBCU gear, to games when they didn't even attend HBCUs. That heightens awareness. And I always think back growing up in Missouri, like I never knew what Georgetown University was until I saw them playing for national championships every year. Oh, it's in DC. It's a highly academic Jesuit school. Oh, wow. And so, some of this high profile stuff with athletics is helping. And Deion Sanders, what he's trying to do at Jackson, Eddie George, going to Tennessee State, those names are helping. And now, you see Eddie George hires Hugh Jackson, and Jeff Fisher is going to be involved in some way, shape, or form. So they can tell recruits, we've got people on staff who have connections to the NFL who might be able to help you in some way, shape, or form. If not get in as a player, get in as a coach, get in as a trainer, get in as an analytics person, whatever your major may be. So again, the fact that Deion is getting games on ESPN2 now, when before they would be on streaming websites, that's important. That's hugely important to constantly spread the message. And I feel as a duty, as do you, on our platforms, to constantly talk up our HBCUs and to recognize people who are doing things for and at HBCUs so people can see. Again, it is a choice, but you can get the same type of education, at a Prairie View that you can get at a University of Maryland or University of Florida.
Right. Oh, and let me just go back. Keisha Lance Bottoms is FAMU.
FAMU, you're right. I'm sorry.
He's FAMU.
I'm sorry. Ooh, I got Rattler Nation coming
at
me.
You know how Rattlers are. You know how Rattlers are.
Ooh, I'm glad you caught me.
You know how the Rattlers are.
I would got tagged walking down the street.
You know how the Rattlers are. So
sorry.
Now, how did you get to with journalism? How did that develop as a passion? How did you say, this is what I want to major in, this is what I want to do? How did that develop as a passion for you?
Well, it actually started, when I was young, when I was young enough, I've always been very conscious of kind of my strengths and weaknesses. And I knew I couldn't do math, and I knew I couldn't do science. So I knew like business majors and things like this were just not going to happen. But I loved, even younger middle school, social studies and language arts and history and things like that where I could write. Plus my father was a sales executive at the NBC affiliate in St. Louis. So I was always around because I would go visit him. My parents were divorced, but when I was on to drive, I would drive down there and visit him in his office and be in the studios and then we go to a baseball Cardinals game or something like that. And so, I was always around it. And I got on the student newspaper when I was a sophomore in high school, and I was a sports editor as a junior, then the editor-in-chief as a senior. And I actually turned down a lot of scholarships because the universities did not have journalism or mass comm programs. They were like, yeah, we've got fine arts, we've got this. Well, football players don't even try to do that stuff historically because that's a difficult program. And in Missouri, that's one of the top journalism schools in the country. They told me, like, hey, we've only had one person go through this, and that was more of an ad sales type of deal. If you can get into the curriculum there, because you had to take 60 hours of really tough courses to even get admitted to journalism school there, and you had to have a 3.0 at that. Well, after my first report card, I was like, gonna have to do better these next 3 semesters.
What a 3.0.
So that contributed to one of my reasons why I wanted to transfer as well. But I always wanted to study journalism. It was when I saw Bryant Gumbel when I was young. He was the only. So there was Irv Cross and Bryant Gumbel were the only 2 black people talking about sports on the regular on a national basis. Bryant Gumbel was on NBC. He was in boxing, football, Olympics, everything. I was like, man, I really want to be like him. And so when I transferred to Howard, it was probably within a semester, somebody from the student newspaper was like, hey, we want you to come in and work on the staff. We know you're interested. And so I was a sports editor, my second year there, and the editor-in-chief of the community news. That was the lab paper. The independent student paper was the Hilltop. And that's where people like Stan Verrett, who's at ESPN, and Darrell Ledbetter. There's a ton of people in the field now who went to Howard with me. Like I went to school with Stan Verrett and Michelle Miller.
You went to school with Ledbetter?
D-Led's a couple years before me. Like, just okay. So here's me and D-Led's legacy. So when D-Led, after he finished, Jim Trotter came in. I came in right when Trotter, my man, my Ace Boone.
Right.
He graduated with Kamala right as I was transferring in. And so, but I mean, there's so many. I mean, Gus Johnson. There were so many of us who were there together. We were an incredibly competitive group. Frederica Whitfield, who's on CNN. We were very competitive. Wow. And I was fortunate at the time to have a professor say, hey, look, her name is Dr. Barbara Hines. Shout out to her. I owe you everything. Who said, Steve, the Washington Post every year takes 12 students from all of the universities around town to cover high school football and high school basketball games. So they nominated me. I had the interview. I get the job. So every Friday I'm covering a high school football game. A couple times a week I'm covering high school basketball games. And they like me. So they keep me on and do some features and some other office work. So by the time I graduated, man, I had a ton of experience, a ton of clips, plus the recommendations of the sports editors there. And I got to work with people who were super nice. Tony Kornheiser, Michael Wilbon, Ken Denlinger, Thomas Boswell. I mean, journalistic legends. Sally Jenkins. While I was still in college. Tom Friend, who covered the Washington football. I mean, all of these people were so nice to me. And so they were able to track me through my journalistic career. So after about 10 years in the field, they brought me back to the Post. Back then I was covering the NBA. But yeah, I mean, I was a longtime print journalist. And I'm so glad I went that route because as a writer, you get to tell a story without pictures. Right. So your vocabulary is enhanced. Your question asking is enhanced. And some of the biggest stories you'll break, they kind of last forever because they're in the written word.
So the Washington Post is where you started.
That as in college. My first job after graduation was at the Richmond Times-Dispatch in Richmond, Virginia. I worked there for almost 2 years covering high school sports and small college sports. I loved it. I didn't have a bad day in Richmond. I loved it. I met some of the most fantastic people there. All of my family is from Virginia. My mother is from the outside of Roanoke, Virginia. My father is from she's from Hampton, Virginia. So I was able to have family in place. And then from there, I went to the Miami Herald. And I worked in Miami from 1990 to 99. And that's where, as my Jamaican wife likes to say, big things are going on. I went from high school sports to covering University of Florida back when Steve Spurrier was changing the game, to covering the Dolphins with my guy Armando Salguero. I was his backup on the beat. But things really blew up for me because I love boxing, and I became a national boxing writer. I mean, I'm covering all the Mike Tyson fights and when he's biting Evander's ear off. And so I really blew up on the scale of boxing. I'm getting all these big stories. I'm one of the first people to interview Mike Tyson when he got out of jail. And so then I end up covering the Miami Heat because it's the chain of our reporters ended up leaving for big jobs. And so I ended up covering the Miami Heat in 1997. And I ended up covering them for 2.5 years. And I went back to Washington to cover the NBA for the Post. I covered Michael Jordan's comeback. I broke the story of his comeback. I covered all that. I know my man Kwame Brown had been on the news because he got it in on YouTube. I was there for all of it. I was there for it all. And so I was in D.C. until 2004 when my old sports editor from the Miami Herald called me and said he was taking over the sports section in Atlanta and might I be interested in coming down there so he could get me back on the NFL. And my wife and I decided, yeah, let's go ahead and give that a shot. And that's where I was for a while. Covered the Falcons. I had to cover University of Georgia for a season, which was actually great because a lot of guys who were on those teams like Thomas Davis and David Pollock and guys like that played in the NFL. But then covered the Falcons for a while. And then, of course, the big story was the Michael Vick dogfighting story. And me and D-Led, my partner, D-Led was my co-beat writer on the Falcons. And, we crushed that story. We really, it was a horrible story to have to cover. A very difficult personal, professional time because it was a story that tore the city apart. And it tore the city apart. But during that, I did a lot of television interviews and whatnot. And the NFL Network decided to offer me a job in 2008. So I was based in Atlanta for 4 years before they wanted to bring me more out to studio in Atlanta and in LA in 2012. And I have been out here since.
That's a lot.
It's a lot. It's a lot.
That's
I've done a lot. A lot of
until there.
I'm not young. I am not young. I am not young. Remember, I said it was Howard from 86 to 89. I hit that double nickel in a couple of weeks, Keisha. So
that's a lot. And thinking about it, because we don't often see a lot of people of color in this position. We really don't. And so I'm always excited when I see a person of color in this position, especially from an HBCU. It's really, really exciting because I have this thing where I kind of go through people's background and I kind of say, oh, let me see what school this person went to. Let me see where this person was or what the story is. And so it's always good to see those kind of things. But going from that college into, going into your first job, how difficult was it? Because I see that you had a list of things and, it's like all of your breaks were coming. It's like, okay, this is a break. And then something bigger came. And then something bigger came after that. So how, those, and I know networking is very important in this business. Very, very, very important in this business.
I was incredibly proactive, Keisha. Sorry to cut you off.
No. That's fine.
When I was interviewing for jobs while I was in college, one of them was with the Miami Herald. And so when I went for the interview, they put me up in a hotel overlooking the Biscayne Bay. And I'm like, I'm this Missouri boy looking over this. I'm getting here one day. I will be here one day. I want to live in the tropics. And so while I was working in Richmond, like every 3 months, I would send them articles like, what do you think about this? What could I have done to make it stronger? I remember the editors who I interviewed with, and I would send them stuff, and they were kind enough to call me. They would call me and say, hey, look, on the story you sent us right here, if you would have asked that question or maybe made one more phone call to a different source, it could have really been a more balanced piece or something. So they really strengthened me journalistically. And so when a job came open in the Fort Lauderdale bureau covering like local high school sports, they offered me a job. And it was great. But to get to the early part, what was it like making the transition? Like I said, I didn't have a bad day in Richmond. I made several mistakes that I learned from. But I mean, it's like with anyone coming from college and you come to an environment where you're no longer among your peers, be
Right.
it racial. But I wouldn't
Right.
say racial. It was more like age, right? I'm working with people 30s, 40s who've gone through divorces or adopting children or going through health issues or deciding if they still want to stay in the game. And I'm like, I wasn't ready for this.
You're
so,
like 25.
Right. I'm like 23 years old. Like,
okay, this is also new to me. Yeah.
Right, like, where's the club? I'm not really trying to hear all this right now.
Right.
But it was just such a great experience because I loved the city and I loved the people and I loved the people I work with. And so that's what made it more palatable, and so leaving was emotionally hard, career-wise, I had to do it. And, it was I worked in a great newsroom. One of my colleagues right now, Judy Batista, and I, we started there together in Miami. And now, we're at NFL Network together. But just a lot of really big stories, a lot of different, you always are scared when you go from covering high schools. The next thing you know, you're covering University of Florida, and all of a sudden they become just great. They're throwing the ball all over the place. And so everything you write is being read, nationally, not just regionally. And so you got to be better. You've got to step it up. And it took me a long time to become a really good writer. When I say a long time, I'm talking 10, 12, 13 years to be where I felt was really like every time I wrote, at least I was going to get a ground rule double. And then, for the most part, I could hit triples. And then every now and then, you knock it well out of the park. Some of the big stories. Like I said, I get to Washington. I break the story of Michael Jordan coming to work for the team in the front office. And I got source. It was awesome. Some of the best reporting I've ever done. Because I didn't speak to any of the, I didn't speak to Jordan's agent. Like, everyone thought I was getting information from David Falk because David Falk had 2 or 3 players on the team. And I was like, nope. Everyone thought I was getting information from the team. I'm like, nope. I would run the information that I was pursuing by somebody with the authority to speak to me through the team. And they would tell me if I was on base or off base. So they knew this was going to drop. And then the rest of the stuff, Keisha, this is some deft reporting because this is the most DC stuff ever. We're coming from lawyers. Seriously, we're coming from lawyers like, hey, a guy in my office is drafting the papers for Jordan to come work. Like, this is what's going on. And this is what's going on. So, it is just me, my editor, and one other person who shall not be named because he's very big in the industry. Michael Wilbon. Michael, he dropped the name. But we finessed this for about 3 days. And in DC, that is a hard thing to do because that's an aggressive and intelligent media market where very little gets past 5-hour cycle before someone else is tipped onto the information. The fact that people I was speaking to kept it closed, and that I was grinding it. And then I just told my editor, I said, we have got to hit this. We have got to hit it. And this was in the beginning of newspapers going to the internet. I want to say this was in 2001. I was covering the game in Indianapolis, a Wizards-Pacers game. And so they put it up on the Washington Post homepage on the internet at 11 p.m. Eastern time. And so everyone's like, what's this? What's going on? And so I'm sitting there like, gotcha. I was gloating because I'm breaking a massive story because here's the greatest player ever coming to work for a totally irrelevant franchise at the time that he had no ties to. And then with my sourcing, I was 2 or 3 days ahead of everybody for 10 days. And it was a really, to do that type of diligent reporting and to have people trust me enough like that. That was important. And it really helped me because trust is why I'm where I am, Keisha. People trust me because I don't have an agenda for me.
Right.
When I was in newspaper, my service was to my readers, and I'm a television, my service is to my viewers and my readers. You know, when I broke the Kaepernick story, that was a written story.
That was going to be
I
my
had
next question.
Yeah. Go
So
fire away.
No, what was that like?
Man. So I get a call from my colleague, Mike Garofolo, before the anthem played. It was pregame, and he said, Steve, I'm glad you're there. And the only reason I was there, let's set that table, was Cap had not played in the first 2 preseason games because he had not been medically cleared. He had had thumb surgery, knee surgery, and shoulder surgery that offseason. So the only reason I was there was this was his first game being medically cleared. Chip Kelley was the coach, and the system Chip Kelley ran was supposed to be the system to get Cap back on track. That was the only reason I was there. Not a camera there. It was a late Pacific time game. It was a 5:30 Pacific time start, I believe. So no eyeballs are on this. And so he tells me, hey, I was just speaking with someone in the organization, and they told me to look out for this because the first 2 games, somebody noticed that Cap wasn't standing for the national anthem, but he was in sweats. So they couldn't tell if he was just like uncomfortable with the surgeries or what. They just didn't know. So, of course, in the press box, you're 5 miles above the field, so it was hard to see. But then you could see him when it was over stand up. And then a great reporter up there, Jennifer Lee Chan, actually took a picture of Cap seated. And so I thought back to the summer when I had gone up there to minicamp. And I saw Cap and mentioned to someone, he is thin. He really looks thin. Is he one of those guys who's got to constantly lift to keep weight on? And they said, no, he's kind of going through this personal, awakening. He's gone vegan. He's really making some mental things. He's really, so I'm checking his social media. He's really on the Black Lives Matter stuff. Because remember, this was the summer when Philando Castile and so many unarmed black men were getting killed by police. Right. And it was the political climate was hot. Hillary and Trump were in primaries. The country was really getting divided. And he was very outspoken on social media. So I'm like, okay, him not standing up, this might be bigger than, him just tying his shoe or something and playing the national anthem. So now I've got 3 hours of game. I've got to finesse this. But this is where covering the NBA helped me because I thought about Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf. When he didn't stand, he stood for the national anthem, but he wasn't recognizing the flag. He was saying his prayer in Islam. And when someone asked him how come he doesn't look at the flag or nods a flag, he said, I cannot support a flag that does not treat everybody equally in this country. And, and he got suspended for a game because the NBA had a policy. The NFL did not have a forcible, you must stand and acknowledge the flag policy.
Right.
So when I talked to Cap after the game, I just told the Niners, I was like, look, if somebody asks about it in the general post-game interview, fine. If not, I need to speak to Cap. And Cap and I had a relationship that stemmed back from when he was at the Senior Bowl coming out of Nevada. And so he knew he could trust me. And when we spoke, he spoke freely. And when the recorder went off and the pen stopped writing, I said, look, Cap, I got kids your age. So salute to you. I mean, there's not a lot of people who do this. There's definitely no starting quarterbacks in the NFL who would do this, but this is going to be big, man. I said, this is going to be a big story that's going to have legs. And he's like, I get it. I get it. And I think we all kind of got it. Well, he and I got it at the moment, but not like, we didn't realize that he was going to be, he is a historical figure, right? So we did not realize that it was going to maybe morph into this where he is going to always, when you say Colin Kaepernick, people are going to recognize what he did, whether they like it or not. They know that name.
Yeah, I think he knew it was going to be big, but I don't think he knew how big it was really going to be. Like looking back at it, you think, okay, he kneeled. And now it is, like you said, it's going to be something that's known forever. That's just what it is. And you think about it pre, and then you think about it post. That's amazing. Then to say that you broke that story. So that's 2 big. So are those your 2 biggest stories that you broke? Oh, it gets bigger.
There've been a few. There've been a few. I mean, the best reporting was for sure the Michael Vick dogfighting stuff. But that was, I didn't break that. That came from an AP report. But I mean, that was almost a year of just an absolute. It took years off my life because on top of it all, I was covering the Falcons. They had just fired Jim Moore as the head coach. They hired Bobby Petrino. Bobby leaves the Falcons after 12, 13 games. It was just chaos after chaos. And again, the city, I mean, people hated each other. It was awful. It was awful. And so that was probably the best reporting. I've been involved in a lot of big stories, but I would say the Jordan one, just because that was some pretty slick reporting that happened right there.
That's amazing, and I agree that whole Michael Vick. Even watching the documentary or the series that they did on the Michael Vick, I didn't even really want to watch. I wanted to watch it because I wanted to see and I wanted to understand it. But even after I watched it, I was just like, it was so heartbreaking. And I'm not a Falcons fan, but just to see that happen with him, it was just so heartbreaking. It was one of the, it was very heartbreaking. And I really didn't want to watch part 2 because we already know what's going to happen. So they're just they're leading up to what's going to happen with the whole dog fight and everything. We already know what's going to happen after that. But I didn't even want to watch part 2. But of course I had to watch part 2 to see what actually happened. But it was one of those, I watched it one time. I don't have any desire to go back and watch it a second time type thing. Have no desire. If I missed anything, I have no desire. So now that you're at the NFL Network, what are you doing now? As I know you're on in the morning, so talk about that current position. Talk about what you do currently.
Oh, I do everything. Well, I mean, when I say that, it's very interesting because when I was hired, I came up through the NFL.com. I was the writer who could do TV, so they used me a lot on television. Then I transitioned more into a TV guy who dabbles in writing from time to time. But for years, they would say, we don't know what. What's that?
Writing? Do you have a preference in TV or writing?
Oh, now it's TV, man. A deadline business, man. Writing on deadline. Woo!
It's not good. It is. Yeah, I get it.
Yeah, I'm glad I did it, but that's for the young folks now. But it's so for years, the people in the like, we don't know what to do with you. We don't know what show to put you on. I was like, why do I have to be designated for a show? Use me where you need to use me. If you need to use me on a remote site, at a game or at a practice or facility, whatever, use me that way. If you need to use me in studio for whatever show, use me that way. Let me be kind of your lead guy on the big story, which was the Bounty Gate stuff, which was the Deflategate stuff, which was the lockout in 2011 when it was me, Albert Breer, and Jason La Canfora really kind of driving the news gathering part of it. So you'll see me on a variety of shows, but I've also tried to keep myself relevant. I said, look, man, let me kind of do the Hall of Fame. I love football history. I love the recognition for the Hall of Fame. I did that 7 or 8 years ago. And have really taken the lead on our Hall of Fame coverage. Now we do 4 shows a year with the Hall of Fame coverage. It's my favorite weekend on the calendar because it kicks off the NFL season. You get to recognize the greats in the incoming class. I've also, with that, I'm on the selection committee for the Black College Football Hall of Fame and the Polynesian Football Hall of Fame. So I help do a lot of special projects in those areas as well. You see me always repping the HBCUs and getting Black college stories, on the NFL Network, or stories about Polynesian players on the NFL Network. That's just me trying to constantly push it in different ways. And then we've got Jim Trotter and I have the Huddle and Flow podcast, which is all the way live.
It's all the way live, guys. It really is.
It is all the way live. And a lot of people are like, man, you work for the NFL. Are they going to censor you? Like, no, they let it rip. Yeah. There's not too many shows where you've got 2 Black guys who went to the same university, working for the same people who are speaking at a very real but very high IQ. Like, we're not doing the hot takes. We're not asking the same questions everybody else asks. And I love it because Jim is like the most brilliant questioner, right? Like he gets on that string, man, and he keeps ripping and ripping. He's just getting information out of people because they trust him, like things they don't tell anybody else. And then I come in and I ask questions. So now we've really got this good conversation going. It's no longer an interview; it's a conversation. Like we had Mike Vick on, and I told him, like, Mike, man, having to cover that story was horrible because him and I were good. I was one of the few people Mike really spoke to. And he talked about how it was awful. I mean, and the stuff I found out, digging, and he's just like, it had to be horrible for you. And I was like, it was the worst. And, there's some of the other things we have, but just to kind of get back to the question. Yeah. I mean, I am fortunate that I am trusted to do every role that there is: host, analyst, reporter, special projects, or whatever. But that really is me. Again, it goes back to trust. That if they put me in this role, I'm not going to flub it, right? Because when I study, I never took a TV lesson in my life. So I watch. I tell people this all the time. My journalistic muse is Anderson Cooper of CNN because he does everything.
Everything.
Right? He'll moderate a political panel. He'll talk about the earthquake devastation in Haiti, while he's there on the ground, while people are, battling to get food. So I'm like, and I'm listening to what he's saying, but I'm watching how he does his job. And I'm watching how he's handling different people. And I've learned to, I do that with news. I don't really watch I watch sports now for educational purpose in terms of the job, but I watch news in terms of watching how different people handle different situations, especially spontaneous stuff. I'm really good when it comes to like really breaking news, a death of someone in Al Davis, or so Steve, we got to get you on because they know I'm ready to rock on the spontaneous stuff. And that's from watching a lot of news people and great news people, do their thing, and just me being an information junkie as well.
So let me go back to you being on the selection committee. You said the Polynesian, is that what you said?
The Polynesian Football Hall of Fame and the Black College Football Halls of Fame. I'm on the selection committees of both. Okay,
so how did you get? Well, I probably know about I would know more about the Black College Football Hall of Fame, but talk about the Polynesian because I don't think I'm really familiar with that one.
Okay, so the same group, it's called Coaching Charities. Coaching Charities puts together the Black College Football Hall of Fame and the Polynesian Football Hall of Fame.
Okay.
So years ago, they asked Charles Davis and I, because it used to be emceed, I think, by John Gruden, the ceremony, but it was a very small event at a hall in a hotel. So they asked Charles Davis and I to MC it, and it was great. I mean, it went really well. You've been there, you see how it goes. And so then they asked both of us to be on the selection committees. And so it's great because now I'm on with all of these legendary writers and journalists. The legendary Roscoe Nance, who recently passed, USA Today was kind of our leader. But just a lot of Black journalists, a lot of people who work for predominantly Black publications, Donald Hunt, people like this. I'm like, man, this is great, because again, these are people that I have not necessarily interacted with before in my life, but now they're educating me, on the Coy Bacons of the world and the John Merritts of the world. And so it's great. So this group, they also put on the Polynesian Football Hall of Fame. So one year, when Troy Polamalu went in with Vi Sikahema, it was a great class. They flew me and Brian Baldinger, because Brian Baldinger, one of his best friends is Vi. They played together with the Eagles, to MC two separate events. It's a much bigger event than the Black College Football Hall of Fame. They have a big dinner where they have just all of these lavish dances. I mean, there's dancers, like the Hawaiian traditional dancers, and all of this entertainment. There's at least 1,000 people at the Honolulu Convention Center. And the next day we go to the North Shore, to the Polynesian Cultural Center, which is near the campus of BYU in Oahu. And it's this incredible IMAX theater. And it is so moving. Some of the traditional things that they do, where they bring the inductees to a group of elders to have a private prayer ceremony, in the traditional Polynesian ways, and it's just really, and then you realize like some of the players historically what they've done, because we've always known there's been Polynesian players in pro sports for a long time. I mean, a long time. And then you see a lot of black. You think they're black players, but they're biracial. Like Juju Smith-Schuster is Polynesian, right? His father's black, his mother's Polynesian. I believe she's Samoan, but his stepfather is Samoan. So he was raised this way. Ronnie Stanley, the left tackle for the Ravens, he's Tongan. So I'm meeting a lot of players this way. Penei Sewell, guys like that. Mike Iapati. It's a really cool, enlightening venture for me that they brought me into, and it didn't hurt that our middle son went to University of Hawaii, so I was out there all the time.
They're doing two things at once.
Oh man, he could not have picked a nicer place to go to school. Even though our youngest son went to college in Monterey, California, which was like equally as beautiful. So that was good. They didn't go to HBCUs, but that's all right. They went where they wanted. That's all right.
You stood in the gap for them. You did more than enough for them.
They know. They were educating people on campus. They know what time it is.
So let me ask you about this. We know coming up next year, we have the HBCU Legacy Bowl. Of course, coming up in June is the Black College Football Hall of Fame enshrinement. And then, of course, I learned about the 2021 NFL Quarterback Coaching Summit, which I want to say you had some influence in that.
Not so much influence on the Quarterback Coaching Summit. The other two, more so. So with the Quarterback Summit, what they have me do, and they've had me do it for 3 or 4 years, it started out as a very small gathering of some black NFL assistants, front office people, and some coaches from HBCUs and college programs, just so they could kind of teach each other different stuff and how they can network to help each other move up the ranks. And then a couple of years ago, they brought me in and made it a bigger deal. The NFL really got involved with this. And the first one we did, I moderated a panel with Marvin Lewis, Urban Meyer, Ozzie Newsome, and Rick Spielman, where it was, okay, guys, this is to show you that there are qualified black coaches, from position coaches to coordinators to potential head coaches, available. Even Ozzie Newsome, the legend who so many black coaches and front office people look up to, said, I didn't know. And it's mainly geared towards coaches on the offensive side of the ball. And it's not just for black assistants. You have Indian, Asian, Latino, but it is a diverse group. So this year it's really big. It's virtual again. Last year I moderated a panel with owners, like, what's it going to take, right? What is it going to, and I pressed them. Like, nobody wants to hear weight when you've got Jim Caldwell, who's won Super Bowl championships, who's coached MVPs, who has Peyton Manning vouching for him. No one wants to hear weight. He's at his out. Eric Bieniemy has coached Super Bowl MVP. He doesn't want to hear weight. Right. When you've got people who've been non-play callers, jump the line.
Correct.
Anyway, so this year I'm doing a different panel with some head coaches, Bill Belichick, and a couple people on the panel. The Black College Football Hall of Fame event in June, it's our annual enshrinement dinner, where we're welcoming in another great class, and then their plaques and memorabilia will go up to the Pro Football Hall of Fame in Canton, which we helped establish a museum there. They're actually building a museum in Canton, Ohio, to honor the Black College Football Hall of Fame. And the reason why I felt it was important there is because roughly 300,000 people roll through that museum every year. And even now, you can't walk into the museum without passing through the Black College Football Hall of Fame. They've been absolutely fantastic at the Pro Football Hall of Fame to say 35 members of our 335 member Pro Football Hall of Fame came through HBCUs. 10%, more than 10% of the people in these hallowed halls came through HBCUs. So you need to recognize. And that was the big thing. So we're not just educating black people who know about HBCUs. We're educating those who don't and who have no idea that, Mel Blount or Jackie Slater or some of these people in the Black College Football Hall of Fame are also in the Pro Football Hall of Fame.
Right.
Now, the Legacy Bowl is a dandy. And the reason why it is extra important, no players from HBCUs got drafted this year.
Mm-hmm.
Only one player got drafted the previous year from HBCUs. Part of that is there was only so many draftable players when you talk to NFL people. But sometimes these scouts just are not putting in the work because they figure we'll get these guys as undrafted free agents. Even when you're getting Darius Leonards and Tariq Cohen's and guys like this coming out of HBCU. So next February 19th, the weekend after the Super Bowl, at Tulane University in New Orleans, we're going to have up to 100 draft eligible players from HBCUs being coached by coaches from HBCUs. Go through kind of a Senior Bowl week. They're going to practice for 4 days and then have the big game at Tulane on that Saturday. NFL Network is going to broadcast the game. We are going to have scouts, NFL, CFL, XFL, there to evaluate the talent. There's no excuses. There's no excuse. Even if you didn't do the homework, even if you didn't feel like getting the film from campus, there's no excuse. Because you tell me one coach who doesn't want to be in New Orleans at some point of the year. And then to come down there and you can get the eye test on these guys. It kicks off combine season, right? The Senior Bowl, East-West Bowl, all that stuff has happened prior to the Super Bowl. 2 weeks later is going to be NFL Draft Combine in Indianapolis, where most of these players are not going to be. Because only one or two players from HBCUs get to go there annually. So this is going to be a big plate of jambalaya right there in front of you in New Orleans that's going to be showcased for 4 days before the game. And there's no excuses to deny opportunities. For the coaches also, they're going to get a chance to network. Potential analytics people, front office, they're going to get a chance to network and get names of people who can help them matriculate to the NFL. So again, part of what we're doing at the Black College Football Hall of Fame in the NFL, no excuses. We're tired of the no excuse. We're tired of the excuses. We're done with them. So now we're giving you none. If you miss, it's on you, and it's intentionally missed. That is what we're leaving people with all of the events that we're putting on.
So I plan on being in New Orleans.
Of course. Go ahead and put your media credential request in.
Exactly. So as soon as they drop that, let me go ahead and put in that credential request. And I'm actually going to the Black College Football Hall of Fame Classic this year with Tennessee State and Grambling. So to me, I was like, I've never been to the Pro Football Hall of Fame. This would be an ample opportunity to go.
Awesome.
So I am. I'm super excited about that. And I actually talked to Akil, Mel's son. So I'm really excited about actually getting out there to see that game and actually to see that Pro Football Hall of Fame. I'm really excited to be in that space. So before I wrap it up with you, let's go, because I know you're back. Well, I'm say you're back here, but you're back with or partnered with the Atlanta Falcons now. Anything you want to talk about as far as like what you've seen so far with preseason or with the mini camps?
I haven't seen anything on field. Okay. I haven't been there. I'm here in LA. So yeah, first I want to clarify. I am still with the NFL Network full time. Right. I'm coming there to help call some preseason games. I'm writing some columns periodically for the website and doing videos periodically with the website. And then once the season starts, I'll be doing weekly interviews with someone from the franchise, maybe Arthur Smith, the head coach. We have to figure that part out. Home games, they will air inside the stadium on that lovely scoreboard at the Benz, and on the local pregame show. So it's a great partnership. The Arthur Blank is he's been very, very good and trustworthy to me throughout the years, even when I stopped covering the team. So when this opportunity came up, I was like, yeah. Like I said, you heard me talking about all the things I'm doing outside of my work. This is another thing. You have to stay relevant. You have to.
Absolutely.
With everything going streaming and this and that, you have to find ways to keep yourself relevant. I'm going to work. I'm going to work until I'm not. And, and staying close to this game and working with a great organization like the Falcons, Arthur Blank. And I'm excited for Terry Fontenot, one of the 5 Black general managers in the NFL, to see what he can do. Comes over from the Saints, highly regarded, and Arthur Smith, to see what they can do. So it's an exciting journey that I hope I don't flub. I try my best not to.
So you'll be here next month, I'm assuming, for the enshrinement. You'll be here.
I will be there. Charles Davis and I are going to be emceeing that bad boy once again. It's going to be a packed
That means
house.
I'll see you once again.
And I look forward to it. I'm so glad you mentioned the Black College Classic up in Canton, Ohio. We really have to get people excited about that because Ohio doesn't have it's got Central State, but it's not a hotbed of HBCU tradition, right? Even though when I was at Howard, like every other person was from Cleveland or Canton or for somewhere. I'm like, dang, y'all okay.
Got the pipeline down there. Nobody from the city.
But,
like nobody from there. Yeah. I got it.
Yeah, but this is something we really get into people to get to understand. I mean, we are bringing something to that fantastic town and that fantastic Hall of Fame that's unique. And Eddie George is going to be coaching.
Right.
Tennessee State, rambling with his tradition.
My hotel room 3 weeks before they announced him because I know the prices are going to go up, and I'm like, thank God I reserved my room before then. But then the outside is that even flying, they've removed some of those flights because of COVID. So Delta removed that flight to Canton. So it's like I got to fly into Cleveland, drive over to Canton. So
it's not a far drive. It's not a far drive.
It's like an hour. So I'm like, okay, I'll just take that drive. Then I have to keep in mind when I'm flying back, I had to leave the hotel like 2 hours in advance. So yeah, but
you're a vet. You'll be okay.
Exactly. We're used to it. So where can everybody find you if they're looking for you, Steve?
Hit me up on Twitter. Twitter and Instagram at Wyche, WYCHE 89. I am there. I'm in the house. You can go to AtlantaFalcons.com from time to time, NFL.com, NFL Network. Probably see me in an airplane or a wine vineyard. That's pretty much where I hang out.
Boxes. I do see the delivery boxes. I see those delivery boxes. I'm not mad at you. Well, I would say thank you so much for joining me once again here at Black College Experience. I appreciate old Bison hanging out with an old Jaguar today. It's HBCU love. And congratulations on all the wonderful things that you are doing. I'm going to say I want to be like Steve when I grow up. I want to be like Steve, but I want to be the female version. I want to be just like you. And before we get out of here, now Steve said that he's not young. He has a birthday coming up next week. He has a birthday coming. So we just want to tell him happy early birthday because he's turning 21. So he's turning 21 on his next birthday. So and it just changed early. The hair color just
premature. Yeah.
So I'm gonna stop.
Look, real quick though.
Go ahead.
Thank you for what you do.
Thank you.
It is important. And you push. And I see you hustling and doing your thing. So all love, all respect, and everybody show Keisha and what she's doing at Black College Experience all the love you can because she puts in the work to represent, and that is important.
Thank you. So I'm going to stop the video here, but hang on for just a second, okay?